Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to No More News. I am Adam Green. Thank you all for joining me today. Monday, March 3rd, 2025. Going to do a deep dive today into the Dead Sea Scrolls and how they disprove Christianity. Many of the ideas we find in Christianity, the themes and motifs, were already existing in sects like the Essenes in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which proves that Christianity did not necessitate an historical Jesus for it to come about. We're going to do a deep dive. I'm finishing my chapter on the Dead Sea Scroll material that's going to be in my book, The Jesus Deception. So I wanted to go through some of the material from top Dead Sea Scroll scholars like Robert Eisenman's Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, and also look at his big book here, like 900 pages. We have some highlights from his book, James, the Brother of Jesus, and the New Testament Code. The New Testament Code being decoded through the Dead Sea Scrolls. We also got the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, the Old Testament books that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we have an old documentary that I saw reposted about the Dead Sea Scrolls with these top scholars when they were initially doing their archaeology and translating of these things with Dr. James Tabor and Robert Eisenman. Old documentary about the Dead Sea Scrolls when these guys were young guys. It's with a Jewish archaeologist too, so I haven't watched it yet. I figured we watch that on maybe 1.5 speed, and then also go through some of the other material and clips and quotes that I've posted and collected over the last few years. So it's going to be a good one, and I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm going to be streaming tomorrow night with a guest about my guest Dominic, and we're going to live stream the Trump address to the joint houses of Congress and then talk about the news. So first, look at this. This is James Tabor today. This was him several decades ago. Him and Eisenman are the two leading scholars on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And here's one of his highlights from Myth Vision, showing all of the parallels, showing that these ideas were not unique to Christianity. They did not start with Christianity. They were already pre-existing, which proves that Christianity could have progressed and evolved out of this cultural milieu. And these memes, these messianic expectations and apocalyptic type of books that we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls are precursors to Christianity, and thus this disprove Christianity as unique. So here's
with the wicked and with.
So here's one from the Dead Sea Scroll.
For you. He made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death. That's very important in the Gospel of Matthew, because supposedly Joseph of Arimathea is a rich man, and Jesus is put in his.
And Arimathea means best discipleville. Just like Judas represents Judah and Judas and the Jews rejecting Jesus, just like Jesus' name means Yahweh saves, Yehoshua saves, Yehoshua's salvation. Also, Joseph of Arimathea, the idea of being buried in a rich man's tomb, comes from the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's where they got it from.
His tomb. And the Dead Sea Scroll copy says, they made his grave with the wicked, and with rich people his tomb. So, is that big? Is it small? I'm just giving you a couple examples because we're in that chapter.
So there you go. And there's many examples like this. Like they were out there saying that they had the new covenant and they were preparing the way in the wilderness, and they had circumcised hearts, the law written on their heart, and circumcised hearts, just as in Christianity. They were doing ritual purity bathing, just like John the Baptist in Christianity baptism rituals. They had a pierced Messiah. They had a Son of God scroll. They had the war scroll with Melchizedek. all of these different ideas later progressed and were incorporated into the sect that we know as Christianity. Show the War Scroll. Yeah, I have that as well. That's in it. So here's the Dead Sea Scrolls prove Christianity didn't start with Jesus. This is another one of the top scholars, Herschel Shanks, The Mystery and Meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now read this. Undermining Christian faith of a certain kind. The scrolls both enrich our understanding of early Christianity and at the same time undermine a certain kind of simple Christian faith, the naive notion that Jesus' Jewishness was accidental or incidental, and the belief that his message was wholly new, unique, and unrelated to anything that had gone before, astonishing everyone who heard it. He also writes, many of the same issues that concern Jesus and early Christians. Moreover, the scrolls have not been subject to later editing, Christian interpretation and tampering, as have texts like the Gospels that have come down to us only in later copies. What the scrolls show is that in almost every respect, the message of early Christianity was presaged in its Jewish roots. And even the life of Jesus, which basically means Christianity is just a sect of Judaism like the Essenes, like the Ebionites, like the Nazarites, like the Naessenes. The texts like the Gospels that have come down to us in later copies. What the scrolls show is that in almost every respect, the message of early Christianity was presaged in its Jewish roots. And even the life of Jesus, as told in the Gospels, is often prefigured in the scrolls. The Beatitudes, for example, familiar with the Sermon on the Mount, have their counterpart in the scrolls. Like, speaks with a pure heart and does not slander with his tongue. Okay. The Gospel of Thomas also, in Luke and in Thomas, it is the poor, the Ebionites, that's what Ebionites means, the poor, who inherited the kingdom of heaven. In Matthew, it's the poor in spirit. A large difference, for the poor lack money, while the poor in spirit lack something very different. Composite aspects of Christian belief and literature, they are not unprecedented. The pre-Christian Beatitudes found in the Dead Sea, he likes using that word a lot, in the Dead Sea Scrolls are part of the Jewish heritage on which the Beatitudes of the Gospels are built. The concept of the Messiah is more sensitive matter in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh my gosh. First, it was thought that the Dead Sea Scroll community believed in two messiahs, the Messiah of Aaron, a priestly Messiah, and the Messiah of Israel, a royal or Davidic Messiah. And that see what I'm saying about the Messianic expectations? You can see the development in Dead Sea Scrolls and in all types of other apocryphal texts of the development of their Messianic expectations culminating in the Jesus story. Like, they took the two messiahs, the Messiah son of Joseph, the Messiah son of Aaron, the priest and the king Messiah, and combined them together into Jesus and called him the Melchizedekian Messiah. Okay. Referring to these scrolls where the distinction was no longer holds. A recently released Dead Sea Scroll text known as 4Q521, or the Messianic Apocalypse, reveals a single eschatological Messiah whose attributes of the single Christian Messiah. The heavens and the earth will listen to his Messiah. Over the poor his spirit will hover, like he hovered over the waters, and will renew the faithful with his power. He liberates the captives, restores sight to the blind, and straightens the bent. That's Psalm 146. Also talks about releasing the captives. Remember, I've been talking about how Trump got in and did the messianic relief, freeing of the captives. I thought it was in Isaiah 42 and 61, and I guess it's also in Psalm 146, 7-8. Let's see. 146, 7-8. Okay, well, that loads. The Lord will accomplish glorious things which have never been. He will heal the wounded, just like Jesus did, and revive the dead and bring good news to the poor. And that's Isaiah 35 and 61. Oh, my God. Okay, revive the dead. So this is where they got the inspiration for the whole Jesus story, was from, just like the Dead Sea Scrolls were doing, their source of all their information about Jesus and where these narratives originated from is the Old Testament scriptures. Psalm 146, 7-8 says, He upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets prisoners free, like Trump released the captives on January 6th, Ross Ulbright, the Silk Road guy, and the Gaza captives. The Lord gives sight to the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. I have put in parentheses references to Psalms and Isaiah, which this Dead Sea Scroll seems to be quoting, just as the Gospels themselves often do. That's what the Gospels are, Peshers and Midrash, quoting the Old Testament scriptures. They were doing the same thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which proves that ancient Jews were searching the scriptures for God's hidden messages and his secrets and his mysteries that could be revealed through the right interpretation and exegesis. And that's the same thing that the Christians were doing. We can see the midrash that they create. If you connecting just a few verses from Isaiah and Psalms and Zechariah and Daniel and Wisdom of Solomon and Songs of Solomon, you can see the whole core of the Jesus story is basically being handed to you just by connecting these passages, which we knew they were connecting. No Jesus necessary to have the Jesus story, just everything that we know about the development of Messianic expectations in Judaism. Unlike the text of Isaiah and Psalms from which the passage is drawn, both the gospel passages and the Dead Sea Scroll speak of reviving the dead. This suggests that the Gospels, which are clearly later than the Dead Sea Scroll text, might have used the Dead Sea Scrolls as a source. They're literally copies of the memes and the themes that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This suggests that the Gospels, which are clearly later than the Dead Sea Scroll text, might have used the latter as a source, or more likely both use the same yet undiscovered source. They have a shared tradition, one that referred to reviving the dead. At the very least, the inclusion of the miracle of reviving the dead in both of the Gospels and in the Dead Sea Scroll. And we only see Jesus reviving the dead in reviving others from the dead in the Gospels. Paul and the early layers of the New Testament have none of that, none of Jesus' miracles. Common milieu in which they were written. Supernatural Messiah and the Dead Sea War Scroll. Here we go, and this is from Eisenman's James, the Brother of Jesus. This one's from See Through It All. I told you it was coming. Immortal Al says, looking forward to the episode of No More News regarding the Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh, we're doing a deep dive. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a huge smoking gun that disprove Christianity and show how Christianity developed and how it's fake and who created it and why, with what objective. Your average Christian, your average Christ is Kinger, your average Jesus was an Aryan, they don't know any of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They can't even name one Dead Sea Scroll. They don't know anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I read every book at the library about the Dead Sea Scrolls and have watched videos and interviews and read the books of all the top scholars. None of the Christians have.
The idea of a supernatural Messiah. In addition, there is the idea of a supernatural Messiah in the War Scroll, related to notions of divine sonship, the Christ, and the primal or second Adam ideology, who comes on the clouds of heaven with a heavenly host to shed judgment like rain on all that grows on earth.
See, also the idea of the primordial Adam. Jesus was the primordial Adam, according to Paul, also in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
In it, too, the Archangel Michael is in some manner associated with this process, but this is about as supernatural as the Dead Sea Scrolls and probably James ever get. Nor do either of these two concepts form part of any blasphemy proceeding.
In addition, the Christians tried to cover up what was in the Dead Sea Scrolls because it was so damaging to the authenticity of Christianity. Here's another one from James, the Brother of Jesus. All of these themes found in the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls predate and disprove Christianity.
Of the star prophecy in the war. Ising 2, quoting Isaiah's 31:8, by the sword of no man, the sword of no mere Adam, the war scroll now specifically goes on to evoke the primal Adam, thus tying all these themes, the Davidic, the star, the Son of Man, the perfect Adam, and the Messiah, together in one extended proclamation.
You hear how important that is? All of those attributes were connected in Christianity to form Jesus, and they were all pre-existing. All the connections were already made before Jesus was ever supposedly even born. Listen to this again. All of the Messianic figures, the Son of Man, the Davidic star, the branch, the rod.
The scroll now specifically goes on to evoke the primal Adam, thus
the primal Adam.
tying all these themes, the Davidic, the star, the Son of Man, the perfect Adam, and the Messiah, together in one extended proclamation, ultimately combining clouds and rain imagery and expressing this judgment, as we have seen, in terms of coming on the clouds and shedding of rain on all on earth. That all of these motifs come together here in exegesis of the star prophecy in the war scroll at Qumran is about
the star prophecy, Numbers 24:17, that they used. It was another story. You see it in the Testament of Levi. You see it in Justin Martyr talks about a star also that's different from the gospel story of Jesus and the Star of Bethlehem. They made Jesus the Star of Bethlehem because the Messiah is the star. That's why you see the star on the flag of Israel. It's about the Messiah. The star represents the Messiah, the Davidic Messiah.
about as much proof as one could ask that the approach we have been following is correct. Nothing less would have prepared us for this, and, without it, we could not have identified the presence here of the totality of these motifs. Directly preceded by an evocation of the form of Adam, this exegesis is directly followed by an extended description of the heavenly host coming on the clouds, richer than in any other source, and repeated a second time at the end of the scroll. For it, the Messiah-like leader joins the poor, Habionim, repeated twice, our Jamesian Habionites again, and those bent in the dust, to rise up against the Kittim and justify God's true judgment on all the sons of man.
See, rise up against the Kittim is rise up against the Romans with the Son of Man, as Jesus rose up and conquered the Romans.
Reads, by the hand of your messiahs, so that you may glorify yourself in front of your enemies and overthrow Belial's legions, the 7 nations of vanity, and by the hand of the poor ones of your redemption. With
the 7 nations of vanity, that's a theme, that's a concept we find in Kabbalah. They had the 7 nations of Edom before in the primordial world, the primordial darkness of Edom. There were 7 kings of Edom. And you find that theme also in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You see it. You find a lot of Kabbalistic ideas in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Just like it merged into Judaism and Kabbalah, and then merged in another way in Christianity, which is also mystical Judaism. Mystical Messianic Judaism.
The fullness of your wondrous power, you have opened a gate of hope, the gate imagery again, to the cowering heart. For you will kindle the downcast in spirit, a synonym for the poor in spirit in Matthew 5:13 above, who shall be as a flaming torch in the chaff to ceaselessly consume evil until wickedness is destroyed. In the exegesis in the Damascus document, the same scepter is the Messianic leader, also referred to in another Messianic fragment, seemingly.
Scepter, like in Psalms 2:9. The scepter also was interpreted. So anywhere it says scepter, that was about the Messiah. You see in Numbers 24:17, the scepter and the star arrive. What is it? I'll get it exactly.
The gate imagery again, to the cowering heart, for you will kindle the downcast in spirit, a synonym for the poor in spirit in Matthew 5:13 above, who shall be as a flaming torch in the chaff to ceaselessly consume evil until wickedness is destroyed. In the exegesis in the Damascus document, the same scepter is the Messianic leader, also referred to in another Messianic fragment seemingly connected to these matters, the Messianic leader, Nasi.
So their Messianic leader in the Dead Sea Scrolls was associated with the scepter. So the scepter and the rod are also Messianic. You find the scepter in the star verse, Numbers 24:17. You find the scepter in the other Messianic verse, Genesis 49:8-12. And you find the scepter in the Messianic verse, Psalm 110. And 2:9. Psalm 2:9. And so all of these themes, you see, this is what they were doing by Midrash. They ignore the context of all of the ancient scriptures, but they view them as like a divine puzzle. With the right connections, they can reveal God's deeper meanings and deeper secrets. So they're connecting the star from Numbers 24, Genesis 49, Psalms 110, and Psalm 2:9.
the Damascus document, he will utterly destroy the sons of Seth, a clear synonym for the 7 nations of vanity, and mentioned here in Numbers 24:17 too. In addition to remarking the repetition of the word power in these passages, one should compare the torch in the chaff simile to the words of John the Baptist quoted in the Gospel of Matthew, and applying to one coming more powerful than he, meaning Jesus, whose shoes John supposedly was not fit to loose or carry. He shall baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire, whose winnowing fan is in his hand, words just encountered repeatedly in the war scroll above, to purify his threshing floor, and he will gather his wheat into his storehouse, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. Matthew 3:11 and 12.
Yeah, burning up the chaff is burning up the stubble of Esau, the Gentiles, the Romans. Dividing the sheep from the goats. Who was it? Needmore Amalek? No, it was Indomitably Based was talking to me about the parable of Jesus separating the sheep and the goats. The sheep are the Jews, the lost sheep of Israel, and the goats are the sacrificial goats like from Yom Kippur, the Gentiles. That's what he was saying. Liam T. Jarrett says The Scepter and the Star by John J. Collins. Good book on this. Yeah, it's another one of the top Dead Sea Scrolls authors. Okay, what else do we
Interesting parallels in the literature of Qumran as well. That is, the City of Blood. Field of Blood has interesting parallels in the literature of Qumran as well. That is, the City of Blood, worthless city or assembly, church built upon blood allusions, encountered in 2 separate but parallel contexts in the Nahum Pesher and the Habakkuk Pesher. Interesting too, in the former, it is connected to evocation of sending emissaries or apostles to the people.
See Through It All says, Joel Richardson said sheep and goats from Matthew is a midrash on Joel 3. All right, I'll check that out.
While in the latter, the City of Blood is accompanied by building imagery and interpreted in turn, in terms of leading many astray and performing a worthless service and raising a congregation, church, upon lying.
You hear this? All of these themes were in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Where would they be inspired to create a fake religion based on blood, following their anti-Messiah? Right here in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Here's the smoking gun of what would inspire them to create this deception and this false religion. Watch.
Or apostles to the peoples, while in the latter, the City of Blood is accompanied by building imagery and interpreted in turn, in terms of leading many astray and performing a worthless service and raising a congregation, church, upon lying, identified with the lying spouters doctrine. In perhaps our boldest attempt at achieving a synthesis between the community of James and the community at Qumran, we have identified these kinds of allusions in the Habakkuk Pesher with Paul's building a church upon communion, or the consumption of the blood of Christ. As Luke puts it in his version of the Last Supper, in which Judas Iscariot too plays a central role and is roundly condemned, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, even that which is poured out for you, 22:20. Not only is the idea of pouring out integrally connected with the Pauline idea of the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts, but where connections involving plays on language and doctrines at Qumran.
So Jesus is pouring out the cup. That's Old Testament code for destroying the nations. See what I'm saying?
Are concerned, the new covenant.
Hold on, Andrew for 10 says, "Hey Adam, thanks for all you do. I felt so free since I first found your videos and took the green pill. Sorry, I can't give more than this." Hey man, I appreciate the 10. 10 is a great contribution. If only more people like Andrew could chip in a 10 here and there on the shows, we would all be doing a lot better. I got you, Andrew. Just saw you.
On language and doctrines at Qumran are concerned, the new covenant is an all-important aspect of what is going on in the wilderness at Damascus in the document by that name, and, as we also saw, pouring out is the root of the way Qumran is referring to the spouter of lying, which quite literally means the pourer out of lying. We shall take one final step more in this regard when we show that even the word Damascus in Greek, of the new covenant in the land of Damascus at Qumran, is being utilized by Paul or these gospel artificers in some esoteric manner to produce the new formulation, the cup of the new covenant in my blood. Blood and cup being in Hebrew dam and kos. It is in this same letter to the Corinthians, it should be recalled, that Paul not only ranges himself against James' Jerusalem Council directives prohibiting the consumption of blood and things sacrificed to idols, but first develops this idea of communion with the blood of Christ, however repugnant such a notion might have seemed to such zealot-minded groups as those at Qumran, not to mention James, who, we have just seen, specifically forbids it. It is this doctrine that is retrospectively attributed to Jesus in these highly prized scriptural accounts of the Last Supper. If anything proves the dictum referred to in the introduction that poetry is truer than history, this does. Paul also develops this idea of communion with the blood of Christ by using building imagery, as we have seen, at one point even calling himself the architect, 1 Corinthians 3:10. In the Nahum Pesher, a variation of this city of blood notation is developed in terms of a city of Ephraim and those seeking...
You see, in Judaism, there's a prohibition on drinking blood, consuming blood. In Christianity, the basis of Christianity is drinking the blood of Jesus. Something like that by Paul would follow along the idea of total theeshu, where they're separating out a false, idolatrous, blood-consuming religion that is supposed to deter Jews and discourage Jews and to be unpalatable to Jews and to test Jews if they follow it and to trap the Gentiles into this idolatrous ensnare. It says Beliar, Satan, cast a net to try to trap and ensnare the people of Israel and also the Gentiles, which are his people. See, in Judaism, they view Jesus as Satan providing a divine role, tricking the Gentiles into following Satan and tempting them as the adversary of God. Christians online will say the Jews worship Satan. Well, they say Jesus is Satan, so that means they worship Jesus then. Rudy 1212 says, Adam, read the book of Jasher, chapter 8, Jesus and Abraham's story. They stole Abraham's birth story. Oh, I think I've heard about that recently. So Jasher, chapter 8 is a different telling of Abraham's birth story, and that's the one that they copied for Jesus? Is that what you're saying, Rudy? I think that's what I remember hearing. I just put it in ChatGPT and asked to summarize it, so I remember.
Smooth things at the end of days, who walk in lying and unrighteousness. The imagery is complex, but nonetheless decipherable.
Okay, and one more here, and then I think we're going to go play a little bit of...
Relating to Paul's understanding. Therefore, once again, we have come full circle to the city of blood, city built upon blood, relating to Paul's understanding of the death of Christ and the fellowship or communion which he stresses, engendered by the blood of Christ. Here too then, this field of blood illusion has its overtones, not all completely straightforward and some esoteric, but nonetheless part and parcel of the overlaps, plays on words and doctrinal reversals in the interests of the ongoing Gentile Christian and anti-Semitic, in the national, not necessarily the ethnic sense, polemic.
See, Christianity started as an quote-unquote anti-Semitic polemic. One sect of Jews blaming the establishment, Pharisee and Sadducees, for colluding and being corrupted with Rome, or for the Yom Kippur sacrifice not working anymore. The Messiah won't come, and they won't be redeemed, and they won't conquer the world. And who do they blame? The people in charge, the people colluding with the Gentiles. That's how you can start with a rivalry and a schism within Messianic Judaism. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's go to a little bit of the documentary, and then we can come back to...
Going before James and the coming down from Jerusalem to Antioch of a prophet called Agabus to predict...
Okay, we'll do one more from James and the brother of Jesus. This is the book he wrote recently, and then we're going to do a flashback of him decades ago when they were first discovering and translating the Dead Sea Scrolls and having to get them out because the church was trying to suppress it because it's such a... It undermines the legitimacy of Christianity so much. They really downplay it. It's a big cover-up. Or they'll try to spin it and go, wow, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were prophets. Look how they prophesied. This is an illusion. This is a foretelling of Jesus. It's like, no, enough.
Coming down from Jerusalem to Antioch of a prophet called Agabus to predict the famine, the disciples are first called Christians in the community there. For Eusebius, Agabus reigned over the peoples beyond the Euphrates with great glory. Note the important usage of the word ethne for peoples, Gentiles here, which of course is the term Paul uses to designate the recipients of his missionary activities. The story has probably even moved on to become associated with the evangelization of India, still associated in myth and story.
Yeah, it all predates Christianity, yep. All these traditions, long before, or not that long before. Literally, it all evolved right into Christianity. Christianity fits right in. Christianity began probably as one of these outlier of the outskirts of Qumran, Essene, Ebionite, James, the Jerusalem church, Nazarite, Nazarenes, Jesseans, they also called them, the Branchians, basically, the branch of Jesse. That's what Netzer and Netzerites means. Netzorians, I should say.
With Thomas's name, though it is doubtful any real-life Thomas ever went that far, whoever this mysterious Thomas was. It is also probably associated with another conversion in the East, that of Queen Helen of Adiabene. It is difficult to sort out the various borders and kingdoms in this area and a group of petty kings referred to in Roman jurisprudence as the kings of the peoples. This term in Hebrew is also used at a critical juncture of the Damascus document where the liar and his spouting, the princes of Judah, and the venom of their ways are elucidated.
Oh, Rudy says the star was mentioned in Jasher at the birth of Abraham. That's interesting. Okay, so that's where you get the star appearing at the birth of something. So they're blending different ideas of the Messianic star into Christianity.
Here, the vipers in "their wine is the venom of vipers" from Deuteronomy 32:33 are directly identified with the kings of the peoples. The story of the conversion of Queen Helen is told by Josephus just prior to the Theudas episode. The aspect of the we document seen in 21:18 of Paul going before James and the assembled elders, presbyterioi, presbyters, in their last confrontation. The number 70, so much a part of these scenarios, also represented the rabbinical understanding of the number of peoples or languages on the earth.
70 nations?
This sense has not been lost in the episode immediately following the election to replace Judas in chapter 2 of Acts about the descent of the Holy Spirit on the whole assembly, together with its principal accoutrement of the speaking in tongues.
It's so Jewish, they believe, like in Kabbalah still today, that there's 70 nations, 70 ministers in heaven representing the 70 nations, and the purpose of Jesus, it was to conquer all of those ministers in heaven, and, man, I forgot the other point.
Together with its principal accoutrement of...
Oh, and then there's supposedly the first 70 disciples in Christianity that go out to the 70 nations to evangelize and convert all of the Goyim. That was the point. Conquer them, theologically conquer the 70 nations with their Messiah.
The speaking in...
Yeah, following the 7 Noahide laws for the 70 nations, that was the 70 disciples to go out to the world.
Tongues, the tongues necessary to take the Gentile Christian message out to the rest of the world. The parallel here, too, to Moses giving the law to the assembled elders should not be missed. In the second version of Clement's testimony about...
Okay. City of Blood, we already did that one. Okay, the overlap. We'll pause there and do a little bit of the documentary. Start this off. Oops. Oh, wait, I had some super chats, too, I wanted to read. General Commentary says, $10 challenge, go. Thank you, General Commentary. And Stacia for 10 says, challenge accepted. Appreciate you guys. So I've seen this guy before. This guy is a Israeli archaeologist.
The Dead Sea is located on the eastern boundary of Israel, about a 45-minute drive from Jerusalem, some 1,300 feet below sea level. The mountain stronghold of Masada is located on its southern shore.
Is that too fast?
Ruins of a small community called Qumran can be found on its northern shore. The Dead Sea is only 11 miles wide, containing 70% water and 30% solid salt. That's 10 times the salt content found in ocean water. Nothing lives in this sea. The ruins of Qumran, overlooking the Dead Sea, were once the home of these wilderness people. In 1953, this little village was found among the bleak, cavern-pitted cliffs of the adjoining mountains. This is the Judean wilderness, and it is here that a few years earlier, in 1947, a Bedouin boy threw a stone through the opening of a cave, and, hearing the sound of breaking pottery, entered the cave, witnessing for the first time in 2,000 years the hidden treasure of this Qumran community. He had discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. 45 years later, archaeologists and language experts are still looking, still trying to piece together an amazing puzzle of international proportions. Dr. James Tabor of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte is one of a team of experts who has returned with modern-age radar equipment in hopes of finding some answers. This ground scan radar is used to find cavities in the rock which may not be seen with the naked eye. Cavities that could contain more scrolls.
We're right in the area where all...
Thank you, John. John says, John Garadas, Ataya to Goishiak, let's get the $10 challenge rolling. Appreciate you. 2x speed is now we're talking? I don't know. It's pretty fast. Come on. What's going on here?
The materials have been found. Not only have materials been found right here behind us, but also on down towards En-Gedi. In other wadis have been found materials. It's a very rich area. From 100 years before the time of Jesus to about 150 years after, Jewish religious refugees, let's call them, were coming out into this desert, living, hiding, working. And they've left stuff. They've left scrolls, they've left their remains. Let's say you go in a cave and it looks really promising. Roman pottery, fire marks on the wall, clearly inhabited from the period. And you have 3 to 4 meters of bat dung and debris. We are modern archaeologists. What do? We don't just take our team in with masks and start digging and sweating. We take the ground scan in, run it around the floor of the cave.
The most famous cave in this drama is cave number 4, jutting out from the cliff where the tourists can see, as if it had something special to share. I talked with Professor Tabor about this cave and about the whole issue of secrecy.
There were 800 fragments of scrolls found in that cave, and very little of that material came out until last week.
Well, I can almost infer from what you're saying that somebody read these texts and said, I don't think we should release these things.
There are all kinds of conspiracy theories that have been proposed, theories just about scholarly jealousies, who gets to have their name on these texts. There's been alcoholism involved, there's been incompetence, there's been all sorts of things. It's not a pretty story, but everybody involved is not.
So this guy, Zola Levite, I just looked him up because they said his name. He is the Jewish roots of Christianity. So he's like a Messianic Jew, apparently. He died a few years ago. Zola's Introduction to Hebrew. Israel by Divine Right is one of his books. Bearded Bible Brothers, Our Jewish Roots, The Covenants of God. Okay, that's who's this probably produced this thing.
The bad and everybody's not good. But it's a mess. Everybody agrees it's a mess.
Well, sure, and it is in the average office too. Yeah. But 20 centuries we've waited for this.
I'll give you an example. The group of other documents called the Nag Hammadi materials were found about the same time. You can get numerous editions now in English of all of the material. It was brought out rather quickly, and with these materials, it wasn't. So what happened, and actually it took until the 80s until the pressure really began to build, and Herschel Shanks, the editor of Biblical Archaeology Review, spearheaded a lot of this effort, but a great deal of public pressure. The public began to get interested in the late 80s, if you recall.
Boy, it takes a while.
As the word got out, people didn't know. 40% of the Dead Sea Scrolls aren't out. People began to say, well, I thought everything was out. What happened, finally, is that Professor Robert Eisenman at California State Long Beach obtained the photographs, not through any source that officially was given them. In fact, we're not even sure if he hasn't told me for protection reasons.
These guys actually leaked the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were trying to cover them up, and then they had to leak them out. This is Bearded Bible Bros, Messianic Jews. It says Our Jewish Roots. And this is, I guess, Zola Levite was the founder of this. And their principal teacher. Might see through it all, and guys, might be an interesting channel to dig into some of the shit that they've been saying for clips. Look at these guys.
I'm not even sure he knows where they came from, but he and James Robinson, the editors of this volume that we looked at on the previous program.
Not the evangelist James Robinson, but James Robinson.
James Robinson, okay. Who's a very, very well-known scholar from Claremont School. Just simply, I guess you could call this the bootleg edition. They simply put this out. These 2 volumes bring us up to date. In other words, with these materials I have here that were already out, and these materials, all the material is out. The problem is this is still in Hebrew. It still is raw material. It's got to be carefully looked at.
For over 40 years now, the group given credit for writing the scrolls was called Essenes. But Professor Robert Eisenman of the California State University at Long Beach, who has spearheaded much of the recent research, has a different theory.
In 1952, a document called the Copper Scroll was found. And this was a scroll that really worried the people who were promoting a theory that we know as the Essene theory, because the Essene theory became the official theory of the group that was controlling the non-biblical texts. And the basis of the Essene theory was to press the documents as far away from Christian origins as possible and render this group that was intrinsic to the development of Christian thinking in Palestine as a pietistic, quietist, more or less politically uninvolved, meditative group. But with the Copper Scroll, which were two scrolls punched into metal, revealed when they were finally opened, and there was a huge political struggle to get them opened, was that we had the temple treasure list here. And you say, well, what would that matter? It mattered because this pietist, quietist, retiring group that was apolitical, etc., why would they be interested
He's
in
got
the
Adolf
temple,
mustache,
and why would they
hilarious.
have a temple treasure list? And what it implied was that we had a group here who was in fact
A little narrow there.
pietist retiring group, but a more activist, militant.
Hey, thank you, Tucker Tarleton, for a 10. Don't be Jewy. $10 shekel challenge, everybody. Tabor is the best Dead Sea guy. Tabor or Eisenman are like well known to be the top one. Or Urshel Shanks is the other one. They both will agree also. Are people in the chat trying to say it's fake? Some people did fake some Dead Sea Scrolls, but no, these guys didn't make up fake pictures. All of them exist. They're in museums all around the world. But tiny little scraps. You can barely even make out what they say, many of them. Yeah, Eisenman actually believes some unorthodox things, too, even though he's the top scholar on Dead Sea Scrolls. He's not the consensus, what he thinks about James and the first Christians being the Dead Sea Scrolls. Sorry to hear that, Ashes from Alexandria. That sucks. No worries, man. Jesus never existed, says, hey, Adam, I'll have to cash in 2 months when my business is back running. Sorry for pushing you on King. I detest that guy. He seems snaky. I'll send cash to your mailbox and some great homemade soup I made from rendered fat from wild game. Guys, don't send any food. I'm not going to eat food that I get in the mail. Not trying to get poisoned by Mossad. Homemade soup made from rendered fat from wild game I harvest. That sounds amazing, though. Any large amount you need to keep all of it, not a percentage. Thank you, Jesus never existed. But don't send food. Please don't send food because I won't eat it. Doesn't matter who sends it. No food in the mail to me. And speaking of Adam King knows his son, Eisenman's son. I tried to get him to set up an interview where I could talk to Eisenman, but apparently he's getting really old and not up for interviews anymore, unfortunately.
Aggressive group probably connected with the uprising against Rome, and the temple treasure list that we found in Cave 3 probably related to the attempts by the revolutionaries to sequester the temple treasure in the face of the coming Roman armies, and that linked this group very closely to the uprising against Rome from 66 to 70. We feel that this movement, the movement we have here, is really the better name for it than Essene or even Zealot is the Messianic movement in Palestine. We've said that this literature is tremendously Messianic. At the beginning, we were seeing documents having to do with two messiahs, but we were also seeing documents having to do with a single Judeo-Christian style Davidic messiah too. And in the unpublished materials, we're even seeing more of this kind of material relating to a kind of normative Judeo-Christian Davidic style single messiah. And if you read your Josephus, the historian of this period who wrote the Jewish war carefully, you'll see that Josephus says in one passage of his book about the war against Rome that the thing that most moved the Jewish people to revolt against Rome was the prophecy that a world ruler would come out of Palestine. That tells us that they were moved by the Messianic prophecy, and that the revolution against Rome that we often think of political was in fact not simply political but religious and Messianic. We think we have here the literature of the movement. We don't say it began in the 1st century. It leads up from the Maccabean period in the 2nd century BC on up through the Herodian period into the 1st century. We you think we have here the literature of the Messianic movement? And in my work, I have said that the last stages of this literature and the last stages of this movement, which is the project I came to Israel to research in '85, is parallel.
Okay, now look, hold on. I got to back this up a second because I just remembered what, when he mentioned Josephus, it got me thinking, but Gnostic Informant sent me something interesting. He said, here it is. Book 2, Chapter 8, The Jewish Wars. I believe this is Josephus. He writes about the Essenes. He says, concealed in his life, they should allow immortal punishment after the... Okay, these are the divine doctrines of the Essenes. This is Josephus. The divine doctrines of the Essenes about the soul, which lay in unavoidable bait for such as have once had a taste of their philosophy. There are also those among them who undertake to foretell things to come. The Essenes undertake to foretell things to come by reading the holy books and using several sorts of purifications or interpretations, and being perpetually conservant in the discourses of the prophets. And it is but seldom that they miss in their predictions. So they're reading the scriptures, they're making predictions, they're making connections, they're doing esoteric mystical interpretations and creating midrash and peshers, and that's even what Josephus wrote about the Essenes. And he never mentioned the Christians, but he did mention the Essenes, probably because the Essenes emerged, the Christians emerged out of an Essene-like sect.
Stages of this movement, which is the project I came to Israel to research in '85, is parallel to the Jerusalem community, that community known in the New Testament as the Jerusalem Church, the Jerusalem community of James the Just, sometimes called in Christian tradition the brother of Jesus.
James the Just, James the Righteous, James the Zadik, the Zadikim, like they have all over the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Jerusalem Church and James and Cephas and Jude and John and the 12, so they were called the pillars. That's a term that you find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, not original to Jesus and his top apostles. No, comes earlier in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the pillars. And also the 12. I believe it's the Damascus Scroll, the community document at Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the two, mentions their group of 12. And Paul never mentions disciples of an earthly Jesus. He says that he appeared to the 12 in James and Cephas. And at that time, there wasn't a 12. There was only 11 because Judas had supposedly died. So it's referring to the community of 12 in the community document of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's where the Jesus narrative originated. And they were associated with Gnostic-like sects, Essene-like sects, in Alexandria also.
Just as at Masada, a few miles south, the people here knew how to preserve their precious water supply. The winter rains came down the mountainsides and filled the large cisterns and then passed through elaborate channels to pools throughout various parts of the complex. This little bath, the mikveh, was used in ceremonial cleansing. They would enter here and dip themselves under the water. It was much like the baptism that John the Baptist preached in this very same wilderness, here where the Jordan River meets the Dead Sea. These people
Thank you, Lisa.
They rose to pray before
Princess
dawn.
Wrong
and
thing.
They held
Thank
to the
you.
Sabbath rigorously. They had a community council of 12 with an inner group of 3. Jesus, of course, had 12 disciples, and that inner group of 3 of Peter, James, and John.
Okay, what else do you guys need to hear? What else do you need to hear to know Christianity is not real? Came from the Essenes. It's copied from the Essenes, these ideas.
The Qumran group had sacred meals with prayers, much like the Last Supper or communion. They talked about the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and about the last days. In the year 68 AD, fearing the oncoming Roman troops and certain plunder, they took their scrolls and hid them in the caves up on the nearby cliffs.
I think...
Hey, Rudy in the chat on Rumble, are you Jewish? I'm curious. From the things you're saying, I already thought you were. He says Josephus was a traitor. His Hebrew blood helped write the New Testament. I don't think there's any proof that he wrote the New Testament. He was unaware of Christianity. He didn't even write about Christianity. That's a Christian interpolation. Jesus is an idol and billions and pray in his name. See, you must be Jewish. An idolatrous religion, huh?
There's a lot at stake. What's at stake is the Jews are going to have to learn, and will learn, I think, from more finds, that Messianic Judaism is a acceptable form of Jewish faith, because here it is here. Now, I'm using Messianic Judaism in the general term, Jews who believe in a Messiah. That many...
So that's Christianity. This is why I always say Christianity is Messianic apocalyptic Judaism. They go, no, it's not. Yes, it's Messianic apocalyptic Judaism for the Gentiles, started by Jews, based on a lie, based on forgeries, based on fraud, the fraud of a person who never existed that they invented. It's the greatest conspiracy of human history. These Christians today think, oh, they wage war by deception and they lie and they set up controlled opposition, but then they're blinded that Christianity is the textbook example of that. And Rudy says he's not a Jew. Okay. Maybe you just understand what Jews believe.
Many Jews have, they think someone's the Messiah and so forth. And
salute to you, Cuddy Rowe.
It's not leaving the Jewish faith to believe somebody's the Messiah.
Yeah. And the Jews that started Christianity did not leave the Jewish faith. It is Judaism.
And so Jews will come to know a wider view of Judaism than just the rabbinic view, which is one stream of Judaism. But there are many streams of Judaism. And this stream of Judaism is quite an important one. And I think the Christians in the West will learn from this that the real roots of their faith are out here in this desert with these people who are very serious about the Word of God.
Yeah, here's the root of your faith, Goyim, Christians. See Through It All says, this all sounds very European and based, sarcastically, obviously, yes. Funny.
And the promises of God and the prophecies and so on. And we're not interested at all in Greco-Roman philosophy and secular culture. I think the Christians will see, as more connections are made, that this is actually the birthplace of Christianity. Essentially, we have the facts.
Yeah, not with the birth of Jesus. The birthplace of Christianity is these ancient Jews in the desert. Cope on that. And your average Christian online that'll like lie and think that we're dumb and I'm a Jew and lie about this shit, they have no clue about any of this. Completely clueless and ignorant and uninformed.
Theories. The facts are that in these 11 caves behind us and to the north were found up to 1,200 scrolls. Now some are in fragments, but 1,200 books, let's say, scattered about. And also behind us is some kind of a community that's been...
Jews living in communes, bathing each other.
Complex. Do the two go together? Those are the facts. And the theories would be...
And reading their prophecies.
From their Essenes to their Zealots. These are ancient Jewish groups. Some people even suggested they're, quote, Christians, unquote. I think if you connect the excavation site to the scrolls, you certainly would say that they were this wilderness messianic movement. That is, they're waiting for the Jewish Messiah. They're out in the wilderness trying to be pure, to withdraw from the corruption of the culture.
Imagine being such a cucked Shabbos goy that you now believe the Messiah that these ancient Jews were waiting for, so that would come so they could conquer the Romans and the Gentile world. And now that's who you worship, because you got cucked. You got scammed. You fell for the hoax. You fell for their deception, and you got cucked and conquered. And your birthright was stolen through deception. As the Old Testament describes what Jacob did to Esau.
Greco-Roman culture with the Romans and Jerusalem being defiled by a corrupt priesthood. Everybody out here agreed on one thing: we hate the religious establishment up the hill.
You see, and are they not Jews? They go, Christianity, they said bad things about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So did the Essenes. They're still Jewish. It's Jewish infighting within Judaism. Now you don't understand how it's controlled opposition. You believe the God, the prophecies, the Messiah, started by all Jews, won't criticize the Torah. It's controlled opposition. Even if it wasn't even originally intended to be that, that's just what it ended up being.
We have, for instance, a very law-oriented group here. We have a very militant, aggressive group here. We have a very nationalistic group here. We have a very xenophobic group here.
Racist.
That is, they don't like foreigners. In Christianity that we normally think about, we think of a cosmopolitan, non-law, Gentile-oriented Christian.
Yeah, they changed it. Some sects of some Jews, it's inevitable, some ancient Jews would see that the zealots were getting destroyed, and that it would be better to have a pacifist take it to the Gentiles, get the Gentiles to believe in it and have it be pacifist so that Rome doesn't crush it. And that was the strand that actually survived out and ended up winning and conquered the Roman world for the God of Israel.
And so the kind of group we have here is quite different than what we normally think. We also have an anti-Pharisee group here of extreme proportions, and probably an anti-rabbinic group, the successors to the Pharisees.
See? Anti-Pharisees even. They're still Jews, but they were anti-Pharisee.
And that is another thing that's somewhat gummed up the works, because really this is a third way. This is not the rabbinic Jewish way. This is not the Pauline Christian way. This is more of an apocalyptic, even evangelical, if you like, a more of an apocalyptic zealot way.
This group believed that prophecy, biblical prophecy, is being fulfilled before their eyes. So they would open their holy books and then look out and say, yeah, this is what the prophet speaks of right here.
And the Christians thought that prophecy was fulfilled in the heavens, in Plato's heavenly Platonic realm, in the firmament, as in Ascension of Isaiah, or in the book of Enoch, in these ascension visions that they claim to be having.
And so they would write almost as something would happen. Like the text that got so much attention in November, the Wounded Messiah text. That could very well be a reaction to one of the leaders who got killed. In that sense, they would be writing it on the spot.
Do you see some of the stuff written in the scrolls related to Jesus?
Very much so, but I think he broke with this community. I don't know that he was ever a part of it, but I think he would have not agreed with it.
Or the people that invented and created and fabricated Jesus were familiar or a part of this community.
What we call halakhic matters. Those who know Judaism know that word, but it means matters of Jewish law. I would put it like this: Jesus seems to share all the major ideas of the group, such as they talk about a new covenant. In fact, I think a good name for these people, rather than Essenes, is the Wilderness New Covenanters, but it's too hard to say. They talk about a new covenant. They have baptisms, or mikvahs. They have dippings, water dippings. They believe that they're out in the wilderness waiting for the Messiah. They have a community of 12, a council of 12, and then an inner group of 3. And if you recall in the Gospels, Jesus chooses 12, and then Peter, James, and John are the inner group of 3, that he quite often goes off alone with.
You see how much this undermines Christianity? None of this is original or unique to Christianity. Christianity emerged out of this. It was birthed out of this climate and these memes.
They have sacred meals. They denounce the religious establishment and so forth. I listed out one time 24 parallels like that, where the ideas are just, they talk about the Holy Spirit, we are the people of the last days, and so forth.
Sons of Light and Sons of Darkness, that's another one that you find in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the War Scroll, also in Christianity, and also in Kabbalah Judaism. Sons of light and sons of darkness.
At their practices, these people would not talk to Gentiles. I don't think they would even have given them the time of day.
They were Jewish supremacists, just like Peter refused to eat with the Gentiles, right?
Jesus, according to the Gospels, encounters Gentiles and actually deals with them. The Roman, centurion, the Samaritan woman. If you remember the story of the Samaritan woman, the disciples come up and say, "You're talking with her?" They're shocked that he would be talking with not only a Gentile, but a woman. So these people would, I think, have denounced him for that. And yet their basic ideas of be pure, prepare the way of the Lord in the wilderness, the new covenant is coming, the Messiah is coming. They're very big and very strong in talking about the chosen ones. We are the elect, the chosen ones. I think this is the birth of the movement out here, not in the city. Jesus is from Galilee. He's rural. I think he's wilderness-oriented. And people don't notice in the Gospels, he goes out to the wilderness.
Come on. He should know better to say Jesus is from Galilee because the New Testament says that and just take it at face value. The Galilee comes from the Isaiah Galilee of the nations. I think it's Isaiah 9, I want to say. Like everything else about Jesus, the Galilee part, the Nazareth part, those are to fulfill prophecies. In other words, they're made up.
Most people would say, if you ask, when did Jesus go out here? And they'd say, well, the temptation. And he went back and lived like a city boy. That's not the case.
And I think he was an evangelical Christian, I want to say. So he's kind of a Christian still. So he's not entertaining the idea that Jesus didn't exist. In fact, he has a best-selling book called The Jesus Dynasty that's based on this supposed tomb ossuary of Jesus and his family. And all the other scholars dismiss it as not about Jesus.
The last winter of his life, which I think was maybe 29, the year 29, he's in Jerusalem for Hanukkah. It's winter. And according to the Gospel of John, the Pharisees and the religious establishment got together and they were going to have Jesus stoned for blasphemy. And this is 6 months before they finally got him. And it says, and this is I think it's in John 11 or so, that he retreated into the wilderness where John had been baptizing up on the Jordan. So he came out here.
Okay. Even the Jordan, baptism in the Jordan is a retelling of Joshua crossing through the river Jordan into the promised land. Mark starts his gospel with that. Says it's a prophecy's fulfilled. Jesus speaks, God speaks from heaven saying, "You are my son," another prophecy. Crossing over into the waters, into the promised land like Joshua did. It's symbolic retelling in a literary construct. The Ghost of Eldon for 10 says, Adam, I'm a bit confused. So basically, we was Jews. If you're a Christian, you think you're a wannabe Jew. Cuddy Rose says, salute, Adam. Thank you. Thank you, Princess Wrongthink. Zionist Cuck says, isn't it amazing how us, the agnostics, learn and teach how fake the biblical texts really are to Christians? Welcome to Anonymous Christians Meeting. My name is Addy, and Jews do not control me. Good one. Good one for that. Hey, thank you for signing up. Nornat as a monthly supporter. Appreciate that. EIQ Mystic says, you helped crush my Christian buddy so bad in a debate the other day. He freaked out and yelled, no more Adam Green clips from Odysee. That's funny. The cognitive dissonance setting in. He can't handle any more info. He just wants to curl up in a ball and suck on his Jesus pacifier. Arcade Outpost for 10 says, the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, are the familial emotional ties to Christianity people have. They can't separate arguments against it from being attacks on their grandma. My grandma was the most hardcore church lady ever, and I don't even care at all. I don't get it. They often have very little understanding of Abrahamism outside of that. Also, send me that ChatGPT debate you had. I'll render it as an MP3. Okay, Arcade Outpost. On Twitter, DM me on Twitter. to remind me. General commentary says, still coping after all these years, forever jealous, envious, angry. Sounds like they made their God in their image. Oh, dude, I'm so tired of the lies and the cope from the Christians and the denial. They're just enabling Judaism and Jews so much.
And it says, and those who wish came to him. Now, I interpret this that he's living in a cave somewhere around here, and he stays all winter. And this is a new image of Jesus living in a cave, hiding out. Why is he hiding out? Because they're going to kill him. But he doesn't run home to Nazareth. He comes out here.
See, James Tabor does this. These quasi-Christian scholars, they'll take something little and they'll do all this speculation. Well, because of this, Jesus probably did that, and then I imagine he did this. And it's just like, come on, dude. You're just fucking making shit up and fan fiction, and this is wishful thinking.
And, you can't prove these things, but
exactly.
What did he do from age 12 to age 29? He didn't study in Jerusalem with the rabbis like Paul did. I think we could say that. Or they would have known him and he would be mentioned as a student of Gamaliel or something. I think he must have been out here with John. I don't know all the time, but must have spent time out here studying the scriptures and thinking about what he felt he had to do. So he comes back, and then it becomes very imaginative. Where would you go? Well, you'd go where it's safe.
See, I don't even want to watch this. He's just like...
hundreds and hundreds of caves. And then it says, as I said, those who wanted came to him. So the movement has a kind of espionage character to it. And certain people of the group knew where he was. They would come and deal. And I picture him almost like Bar Kokhba, but it's not a military mission. It's a spiritual mission. Sending out emissaries from his cave, directing various followers. Well, we need to get ready for this.
So now he thinks Jesus was Osama bin Laden having disciples, running his disciples from a cave.
Here's the plan. And that's the side that we don't think about till you come here. It makes it much more vivid. I mean, all historians imagine things, but, we have the Dead Sea behind us, the head of the Jordan Water. To say that Jesus didn't know about this community, I think, is to say that somehow he would be, either blind or incompetent. Of course, he knew about it. Now, did he come and eat and have friendly relations with them? Possibly growing up, I think so. Luke says that John the Baptist, his cousin, was Bamidbar in the wilderness until his revealing, when he was probably also about 29 years old, 27, 29, in the wilderness. Well, where do you live out here, you see? So I think John the Baptist must have spent much time here. Maybe Jesus would come and visit and then begin arguing with them. Well, I don't know, you people...
I do believe John the Baptist was probably real, and very likely he was one of these sects. There wasn't just, this is important too, there wasn't just like one monolithic sect of the Essenes. There were all these different splinter sects and different groups within the Essene umbrella.
Say that we should not even talk to Gentiles, and yet the message needs to reach the whole world. I suspect they would say, well, wait till the Messiah comes and it will. And he might say something like, maybe it's time. This is what I imagine. But I think he was...
A whole lot of imagination here.
Do you see any parallels that relate to these days today?
The biggest parallel would be that there are Jews, once again, who are Messianic, and I mean that in the most general sense. That is, who are talking about... when is a Messiah coming? Now, this could be everything from Jewish Hasid groups like Lubavitch, who are talking all the time now about this is the time of the Messiah, he's coming. In fact, they thought he was going to come, this year.
So the first Jews were just like Chabad Lubavitch, some mystical Jews waiting for the Messiah to come. And when a Messiah didn't come, they said, oh, he did, but he came and did the sacrifice in heaven. And you can learn about him. Their only source of knowledge about him was from the scriptures. Jesus hid the mysteries of Jesus in the scriptures, and they're now being revealed through Paul and Cephas and James and these apostles.
So we're definitely in what I call apocalyptic messianic times. Also, for the first time, really, we have large numbers of Jews trying to reclaim Jesus as a Jew. That hasn't happened before. See, when the Jews are scattered in Europe and Christians come to them with crosses in their face and say, we're getting ready to kill you in the name of this, you're not going to get a lot of converts to that religion. But now we're in a time where when you're in the land...
Well, they did that. Yeah, they did.
I don't have a single social media.
They didn't get converts. Hold on, what is this?
With the Bearded Bible Brothers, but...
The Bearded Bible Brothers. They didn't get converts like that. They had forced conversions. They were going around. They always... It's like the Jews are the ultimate victims of the Christians, but they'll ignore all of the pagans that like all the many millions more of pagans where their religions were completely wiped out, or they were forced to convert, but the Jews weren't forced. Yeah. The Jews are still waiting for the Moshiach to come now, just like the Christians are waiting for the Messiah to come now. And then we got these idiots on Twitter, see through it all, that are like, oh, Judeo and Christian, they have nothing in common. You're both waiting for the fucking Davidic Messiah to rule the world based on Torah prophecies. Stop gaslighting that you have nothing in common. You guys share a common foundation. What's up? Expose the Enemy is in the chat. What's up, John? He says, this was a cult. Yeah, they're all Jewish cults. Exactly. Christianity began and still is a Jewish Messianic apocalyptic cult.
People can think again, you see, and they can say we're here and we're regathered. And I think scholars have already done this. Most people don't know, but most scholars would say, where does Jesus belong? He belongs within Judaism. He's a great Jewish teacher, sage, prophet. This is where he belongs. You know, when you historically...
Hold on. We'll save that for the clip later on, right? See through it all, that one right there? Throw that into a mix. No, he's not. He's not Jewish. He was an Aryan, and he had blonde hair and blue eyes. You're going to tell me that? Get the fuck out of here. It can't be, like, we can't even get past the disinfo, the wall of Christian disinfo online to address the Jesus deception. We're busy dealing with coping Christians every day saying Jesus wasn't Jewish and he had blonde hair and blue eyes. The Jews are probably laughing and wringing their hands at how stupid the Christians are and how badly they discredit themselves and how badly they miss the mark. They're so dumb they don't even know to criticize Jews for like the actual real reasons, the real issues.
Plot someone. He's not a Greek. He's not a Roman. He's a Jew. And Jews are hesitant. As you know, the Orthodox won't even say his name without a slight curse to it. But that's who they're cursing, though, I don't think is Yeshua, the true Yeshua, the historical Yeshua. They're cursing an imagined horrible person that really was not Jesus at all. But
you see, they don't actually hate Jesus. They think Jesus was all right. It's only the Gentiles and the Romans that twisted him to be bad. This is how they can rectify Jesus and have the return of the kosher pig and re-Judaize and go to the Hebrew roots of Jesus, is with this type of thing. And you see, Chaim Maccabee says that. Where's Chaim Maccabee's book? The Talmudic scholar that wrote The Myth Maker, Paul and the Invention of Christianity. He claims Paul was a Roman agent that corrupted the Jewish Jesus's true teachings. And there's a huge push to say the real, true, historical Jesus was not killed by the Jews. He was killed by the Romans because he was a Jewish rebel, and the Romans killed him, and he never claimed to be God. So now we have a perfectly kosher, compatible Jewish Jesus we're left with.
The God of the pagan Christian church. So, in a way, let them curse him if they could also understand.
Good question, Expose the Enemy. I don't know the exact date. I'm going to try to look this up right now, what the date is.
No, and I'm still speaking historically. I mean, I think even a historian, truth is truth, and he belongs here with his people. I think he ought to come home too. And the scrolls and everything. I believe that. Now, that goes beyond, is he the Messiah? Is he the Son of God? These are theological questions that can be discussed. But the first thing is to de-paganize him, get him back in the land, show that he was a Jew. And he is the most influential man in world history.
What do you think happened?
Hey, the most influential man in world history is a fictional Jew that Jewish supremacists made up. And now all the Goyim fall for this lie. This book is called, or this video is called The Secrets of the Scrolls.
Again, it's broken.
This channel, Wrestling with God, posted it. I saw a few people talking about Kip Davis. He's the Dead Sea Scroll expert on Alex O'Connor. It just popped up for me. Does it have the date? No date on this documentary. I'll have to look it up. It's called Secrets of the Scrolls, though. I'm kind of interested in what some of the comments say. Maybe there's some interesting comments.
What happened to the people here?
What we think happened is when the war broke out, the Jewish war with the Romans in the year 66, that everybody had to decide what they're going to do. It's like Israelis today, you know, which side are you on in terms of, you know, the political questions and so on? Well, they had their political questions sharply divided. There were Roman collaborators, there were Roman resistors, but the religious communities had to take a stand. There's a war going on, people are dying. The Romans are systematically, they're going to come down this road, whatever road there was, for everybody's wanting to go to Masada, down south. It's the big fortress. If you hold that, you can help hold out for the whole. So I think what happened in terms of the archaeological evidence.
Okay, I found it. Hold on. Sorry to interrupt, but I found it. Look, it was posted like almost 2 years ago. Secrets of the Scrolls on this Bearded Bible Brothers, Our Jewish Roots channel. It's only got 1,400 views. It was aired on the Family Channel and other major networks at prime time. 4 programs, Secret of the Scrolls series, James Tabor, recorded in 1993. Talks about the Son of God, the branch of David, stripes or piercings being put to get, raising of the dead, all familiar with Christianity. There you go. There it is. 93 is still 32 years ago? Jeez.
The Romans got this place and wiped it out, killed everybody.
In your opinion concerning these scrolls, what's at stake here for Christianity and Judaism?
We have a theory, and we've had it from the beginning, and what we're seeing confirms our theory more and more rather than makes us doubt it. That is, we feel that this movement, the movement we have here, is really the better name for it than Essene or even Zealot is the Messianic movement in Palestine. We've said that this literature is tremendously Messianic. At the beginning, we were seeing documents having to do with 2 messiahs, but we were also seeing documents having to do with a single.
Didn't we already watch this part?
Style Davidic Messiah too, and in the unpublished materials, we're even seeing more of this kind of material.
Why are they showing that again? William Orange says, forget about it. You think any of these Christians dismissing what we're talking about know about any of this information?
Forget about it.
No. Forget about it. They don't.
Relating to a kind of normative Judeo-Christian Davidic style single Messiah. And if you read your Josephus, the historian of this period, read the Jewish war carefully, you'll see that Josephus says in one passage of his book about the war against Rome that the thing that most moved the Jewish people to revolt against Rome was the prophecy that a world ruler would come out of Palestine. That tells us that they were moved by the Messianic prophecy and that the revolution against Rome that we often think of political was in fact not simply political but religious and Messianic.
See, their war against Rome, oh, that's a good one. Their war against Rome was not just militarily, but religiously. The purpose of the messianic expectations was to conquer Rome, and they invented Jesus, and it conquered Rome by design, as intended. Mission accomplished.
Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jewish God!
And the rest was history.
We have here the literature of the movement. We don't say it began in the 1st century. It leads up from the Maccabean period in the 2nd century BC on up through the Herodian period into the 1st century. We think we have here the literature of the Messianic movement.
I think there's a lot at stake. What's at stake is the Jews are going to have to learn, and will learn, I think, from more finds, that Messianic Judaism is a acceptable form of Jewish faith. Because
okay, why? We're 25 minutes in. Didn't we already just watch all of it? Or maybe I watched this by myself. That's what it was. Am I going crazy, or did we already hear all of this? And they're replaying it.
It is here. Now, I'm using Messianic Judaism in the general term. Jews who believe in a Messiah. That many Jews have. You know, they think someone's the Messiah and so forth, and that is not leaving the Jewish faith to believe somebody's the Messiah.
Yeah, you're still Jews, Christians.
Jews will come to
it's
know
still a Jewish faith.
Wider view of Judaism than just the rabbinic view, which is one stream of Judaism. But there are many streams of Judaism, and this stream of Judaism,
Christianity, just another stream of Judaism. We'll mark that. Stinging Metal says, so Judea was the Hamas to Rome. I mean, Israel kind of starts and funds Hamas, so not exactly the same comparison, but yeah, I see what you're getting at. And I see we broke 100 over on Odysee. Appreciate you guys. Ilria Slavia says, in Slavic countries, Christianity helps us to maintain strong communities against global fascists. In Slavic countries, huh? Okay. How's it working out for Christian America and Christian Europe? Have you maintained strong communities against the fascists? Not really, huh? Dominic Buscemi for 10 says, I read that during the years Jesus was missing, he spent time between Krypton and Dumbledore learning to code. I know, that's the level of James Tabor's speculation here. While this is little known, it is mentioned in the Superman comics and Harry Potter verses. That's probably what this sounds like to most people. Overtime for 20, appreciate you, Overtime, says, homesick from work today, glad I could catch a stream. I hope this heals your, we'll be like Jesus and the Dead Sea Scroll figures and heal your wounds and heal the sick. Ah, blasphemous, how dare you. Bloodstain says YouTube's recommendation feeds have advanced to the topic of promoting Jesus historicism just this week. It's accelerating. Yep. True. I see it too.
Is quite an important one. And I think the Christians in the West will learn from this that the real roots of their faith are out here in this desert with these people who are very serious about the Word of God and the promises of God and the prophecies and so on. And we're not interested at all in Greco-Roman philosophy and secular culture.
And pagans and Northerners and Gentiles should reciprocate that attitude and not give a fuck about their prophecies of their Messiah, their delusional hopium, chosen people delusions. But instead, Christians do, Muslims do. And then they're so blind and cultish that they don't even realizing how they're dancing along to the beat and affirming all of this desert nonsense.
I think the Christians will see, as more connections are made, that this is actually the birthplace of Christianity.
Okay.
Not just the land of Israel, but a
This might be the intro
group of Jews
to the series
who are waiting for the Messiah to come.
Yeah, they go, Jesus isn't the Jewish Messiah. It only calls him the Jewish Messiah, and every indication is that he's Jewish in the Bible. Christians will go, no, he's not Jewish. And I'll go, who was waiting for the Messiah but Jews? The only people waiting for a Messiah before Christianity were Jews. Yehudi, Iudeans in Greek, Yehudi in Hebrew. That's who was waiting for a Messiah. And they'll go, no, he's not the Jewish Messiah. He's the Messiah of everybody. The Jews don't believe in him. Some Jews today don't believe in him. Their copes are pathetic and retarded. Sometimes I have a hard time believing that the Christians even believe these copes. They just like to lie to themselves. They're in self-denial.
Could he be Messiah, the one whom the prophets foretold?
Good one, Jack Stone. Jack Stone says the algorithms pumping historical Jesus are the same ones that got the call as all the Christian accounts pushing the Aryan Jesus forgeries. I know, and no people really believe this. You go to any church in the world throughout history, they laugh you out of there and saying Jesus was white and Aryan. What? So you're telling me all of church history, all the church fathers, all the churches and denominations got it wrong, and you think this is the path forward? No, you're just preventing and stopping people from actually escaping and breaking the chains of the Yahweh delusion. And you're worshiping a Jewish guy and affirming Jewish themes, lying to yourselves and us that he's some Aryan anti-Jewish person. It's absolutely retarded. It's dead on arrival. It's a non-starter. It's so easily disprovable, so discrediting, and yet this is the state of the internet.
What What happened was back in 1985-86, I was the National Endowment for the Humanities, American Schools of Oriental Research professor in residence at the Albright School in Jerusalem, the famous American school. And I came here to do research on the parallels between the early Christian community in Jerusalem and the Qumran community. But I was not able to do any research because they had all the scrolls sequestered, and there was nothing new we could do in Jerusalem that we couldn't do back in California. So when we saw what that situation was and that we basically wasted a whole year, we began to get very anxious about the access situation to the scrolls, and we started this campaign. And in 1989, we officially wrote to Strugnell and then to the who was then the new editor of the Scrolls International Committee, John Strugnell, and to Amir Drury, who was the new director of the Department of Antiquities in Israel. We officially asked for access to hitherto sequestered scrolls, and we found that they were not going to give us access. Our intention at that time was to do a court case in the Supreme Court. The import of that desire to do that had been to push them forward to open up the situation more. At that time, I began to receive pictures. People began from sources seeing my position on the point of the struggle to free up access to the scrolls. Pictures began to come to me from unidentified sources that I'm not at liberty to tell. And I suppose the reason I was singled out was because they figured I'd know what to do with them. And they were right. I did know what to do with them, and my intent from the beginning was to publish all the scrolls, have free access for everybody. I never liked this idea that only qualified scholars, because the moment you get into the idea of qualified, then they say, well, who's qualified? He's qualified and he isn't. Professor Golb in Chicago, who is a great scholar in his own right, because he disagrees with this professor over here, they can say he isn't qualified. Or a fundamentalist Christian, or someone who believes in the word of the Bible or something like that, because they don't like his theories about what he thinks about the Bible, then they say that he's a fanatic or a crazy. We're not going to give him access. That's not the way scientific endeavor moves forward. Scientific endeavor moves forward by free information. We began to see that the whole thing was kind of peculiar, and we began to look into the origins of what happened. And that goes back into the whole history of how the scrolls were found, who found them, and the process of finding. And your audience or your listeners or viewers may not know, the first scrolls were found in the middle of the Arab-Israeli struggle in 1947. And those scrolls, one way or another, found their way into the hands of the Israelis. And most people thought that was all the scrolls there were. That was considered or called Cave 1. As the caves were revealed, they got numbers in the order, chronological order in which they were found. So the scrolls from Cave 1 made their way ultimately into an institution in Israel known as the Museum of the Book. So when they got into that, and at that time the Israelis did not try to make any political capital out of them. They didn't try to build scholarly empires. They published everything. They didn't publish final editions with commentaries that let everyone have free access, and that was the right way to proceed. However, after that began to happen, more scrolls came in. At that time, the partition of Palestine occurred. Those were caves 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., 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 on up to 14. So between 1949 and 1956, a whole new other group of scrolls were coming in. But by that time, the area was under Jordanian administration. These were Hebrew, Aramaic documents. Before the rise of Islam, the Jordanians were not particularly interested in them. So who in East Jerusalem was Johnny on the spot to take over the situation? As it turned out, there was a churchman. His name was Roland DeVoe. He was the head of the Dominican order in Palestine. He wore 2 hats. He also was head of a school of French Vatican archaeology known as the École Biblique. He was the one the Jordanians, or he turned to the Jordanians, or vice versa. In any case, between the two of them, Father DeVoe basically took the documents off the Jordanians' hands. And in this process, he developed what he called an international committee. It was only international in name only, because first of all, it was always Judenrein. That is, no Jew could ever be part of this committee. So it was a fiction of an international committee, but on the whole, it was dominated by churchmen. For the few non-church or Protestant scholars that were part of this committee, there was always more cleric-type monastic individuals who were part of this committee.
Hear that? The church tried to cover it up. There's another... Oh, wait, shoot, that's not it. Hold on. There's another old documentary on James Tabor's YouTube channel, Robert Eisenman and the Dead Sea Scrolls, best interview ever, and it's got 115,000 views. I remember it posted a year ago. I watched it when it first came out. I might have to do another stream because we're already an hour and a half in. I'm only going to do 2 hours today. I will do another stream where we finish this doc and then play this too, because all of this stuff is so important. You're looking for like the huge smoking gun that shows Christianity is fake and Jewish. Dead Sea Scrolls is it. And he gets more into the conspiracy and the cover-up of the Christians trying to suppress what was in these scrolls.
That is, the principal people were Father DeVoe himself, a man called Father Milik, another man called Father Starkey, and in the present generation, they have been succeeded by a father called Emil Puesch. He is the reign.
Christians lying and covering stuff up and trying to monopolize the discussion. Oh, yeah, that never happens. Every single time.
A Dominican father at the present time. What we discovered that there was a kind of fiction developed here. That is, there were two kinds of scrolls that were coming in, and this is very difficult for your viewers maybe to understand. One were biblical texts. Texts of the Bible, old texts that showed that the Bible as we had it was basically the same text that was operating then.
The Dead Sea
But
Scrolls
there was another
Bible.
group of texts that were actually even more interesting. People would have thought the biblical texts were the most interesting. In fact, they weren't. They were new texts no one ever saw before, what we called sectarian text or non-biblical texts. These texts always seems to go to these clerics. That is, the Protestant members of the committee, on the whole, were given the biblical texts. They were represented primarily by a man, Frank Cross, at Harvard, but the other texts basically went into the hands of Milik and this individual that we now know, Strugnell, and some others of that kind, Father Starkey. And basically they were getting the most interesting texts because they were interested to see from this period what was happening. So what developed was an information management policy. Like any institution, information is always managed in one way or the other, and their basic...
So speaking of the Old Testament books that they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I just looked up Obadiah, the book that, as Tovia Singer says, is the whole book dedicated to the destruction of Edom, and Edom is mentioned in the War Scroll being destroyed, and 4Q434. So they were interpreting Edom to be about the Romans who were occupying them and destroying their temple at this time. And reinterpreting prophecies of the Old Testament about Edom to be about the Romans and the Messiah. Like in Numbers 24, the star prophecy, Numbers 24:17-19, is about conquering Edom.
Desire was to play down, reduce the interest in the scrolls, and to make it look like we had documents that were not of the most incredible importance for the history of early Christianity in Palestine. So what happened between the early 60s and the present was that basically all the Protestant members were pushed off of the committee. Allegra was pushed off of the committee. A man called Hunziker in Germany was pushed off of the committee. The individual from England that we referred to, John Strugnell, converted to Catholicism. And basically you had a committee dominated by churchmen and clerics. And that was the situation up till the mid-'80s when we began, as I said, to see this weird situation where...
Just like we see even in academia, we see the Abrahamic gatekeepers. Oh, why can't we why can't we wake everybody up about the Jesus lie? Because all the Christian and Muslim alliance gatekeepers, why can't we actually oppose Zionism at the root of the Torah, of Yahwehism, of the prophecies and the Messiah? Why can't we oppose that? Because of the gatekeepers shielding it, the Abrahamic matrix gatekeepers shielding and dominating the conversation with their controlled paradigm.
We had utter secrecy and no one was allowed to see anything. And when we began to agitate, the strange thing is that we ran up against the Israeli authorities. Now you might say, how come the Israeli authorities got into it? Well, a very peculiar thing happened. In 1965, John Allegro, who had been fired from the committee by the others, because he was English, had great influence with the Jordanian authorities. And at that time, the Jordanians themselves were getting very fed up with what they were witnessing as far.
Yeah, John says too much money to be made in religion, too much money in control, too much support of Israel, too much of a discrediting and controlling all sides of the debate. Good point. Ortho bros equals worst defenders. Yeah, he mentioned Allegro too. He was the one that said the Dead Sea Scrolls in Christianity was about the sacred mushroom. But most scholars don't take him seriously, though.
As the secrecy of this committee. John Allegro prevailed upon the king and his associates to nationalize the material in the East Jerusalem area in the Rockefeller Museum. And so in 1966, right before the Six-Day War, the Jordanian government nationalized the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Rockefeller Museum as a preliminary step towards taking control away from this church-dominated group and giving it to a more open scholarly group. The Israelis conquered the area in 1967.
See, if the Christians had it their way, they would have kept these things buried forever. Who knows what else the Christians have, the Vatican has hidden that would undermine them. Who knows what the Jews have that would undermine Christianity, that they could be blackmailing Christianity and the Pope with. Imagine the Jews discovered some Dead Sea Scroll and it totally exposes that Jesus isn't real or that Christianity isn't real, like just blatantly and explicitly does it. And the Jews are like, hey, Christians, look what we found. Imagine the leverage and blackmail that they could use that.
Benefited from John Allegro's pressure on the Jordanian government. That is, the Israelis now succeeded to the ownership of the scrolls because the Jordanians had nationalized them. But the Israelis knew nothing about all of this conflict that had gone on before. And so they basically gave the International Committee a new lease on life. So we had 20 more years of secrecy now under Israeli sponsorship. When the Israelis began to realize what was going on in 1986, 87, and 88, and under our pressure began to introduce their own people, then they became sensitive because they said to the world at large, look, we've just got our people into this now. How come you're just taking it away from us? And that was the basic approach of the Israeli establishment, of the newspapers in Israel, and so on. But our response to that was simple. It was too little, too late. The time had come for open access to all scholars without differentiation, and we achieved that this year through 3 events. 1, the computerized reconstruction of the unpublished transcripts. 2, the opening of the Huntington Library files, for which I was a consultant and I was the first scholar to be allowed in to see the Huntington Library files. And 3, our final publication of the complete facsimile edition of all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we did in November, which included all the pictures that had been coming to us since 1989, approximately 1,800 plates. As far as we're concerned, the whole controversy is over.
Now that the latest scrolls have been released, where does the search for new material go from here? We'll explore that question with Professor James Tabor.
Can you tell us about what you're doing here today?
Our purpose is twofold. First, we have permission. You have to get permission to do anything over here. We have permission from the Israelis, from the Department of Antiquities, to survey, to do a cave survey from Jericho north of here all the way down to En-Gedi. And we're right in the area where all the materials have been found. Not only have materials been found right here behind us, but also on down towards En-Gedi. In other wadis have been found materials. It's a very rich area. From 100 years before the time of Jesus to about 150 years after, Jewish religious refugees, let's call them, were coming out into this desert, living, hiding, working, and they've left stuff. They've left scrolls. They've left their remains. So the biggest thing we're doing is every day our teams go out in the morning. We're divided into teams. They've been given a kilometer down the highway, and they map every single cave. And as you can see, driving up the road, we're speaking about thousands of caves.
Yeah. Caves of Qumran. See through it all says sounds Aryan. Yeah, funny how all these scholars aren't mentioning how the Dead Sea Scrolls never say, like, oh, we've got blonde hair and blue eyes and don't look like these Edomite Jews around here that stole the Jewish people's identity and we're the true Jews. It's none of that anywhere. These idiots will harp about it all day online with their forgeries.
We have very detailed maps like this, which take each kilometer block. And we've taken each kilometer, like my kilometer is 253 south. I've been working on it for a week now. That means we go up in all the cliffs. You have to go up. What you do is you first map them from the ground as you can see them, then you start going up. What often happens though is you get up there and you'll see something you couldn't see from the ground. Like the area I happen to be in has 5 plateaus. And we discovered various caves and things that you cannot see until you get to the next level. The other thing that happens is you'll see a narrow slit, maybe a meter high, and you think, well, that's just what we call an animal hole, or maybe a mountain lion hangs out there. But you get up to it and look in, and it's a narrow opening into a whole cave, you see. Now, those are the type you miss, but actually that the zealots and the Messianic believers and so on would have wanted to find most, because that's exactly what the Romans would think, like, well, there's nothing there. Like the scrolls found in Cave 1, I mentioned earlier, small opening, you couldn't see. We will then begin systematic exploration. This will go over several years, of all the caves that look promising. This is a very lengthy thing. See, what has happened is when the scrolls were discovered by the Bedouins, the Europeans got involved, Father DeVoe and the Catholic team especially. But it was mainly treasure hunting, like scurry up these caves, look in them all quickly, let's hope we find something, then we can sell it to the Europeans for so much per centimeter. This is what it finally came down to. They brought it like in shoe boxes full. Here I found these. Where did you find those? Oh, in a cave over there. Sometimes we're not even sure where this material came from, you see. So we think there are still materials here and we want to find them. And we think they relate to the wilderness communities that were out here during all of these periods. And I would think perhaps there are materials from the Jesus movement. Now that would be a find. Nothing outside.
They never found anything talking about Christianity or Jesus. And then the Christians will be tricky and they'll say, "Oh, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they don't talk about Jesus. They don't mention Jesus." No, just all of these same ideas that we later find in Christianity. They don't give you that full truth.
Has ever been found from the 1st century. But the striking thing about what we're doing, I'm still talking about the first part of what we're doing, surveying, is it's never been done systematically. See?
Are you using something special to help you find things?
No, when you go up in the cliffs, we are using radar ground scan equipment. If we find, let's say you go in a cave and it looks really promising, Roman pottery, fire marks on the wall.
We saw this. Okay, this looks new.
Scripture. I find that interesting. In any case, the article went this way.
Hold on.
I'm going to do something I rarely do on a program. I'm going to read from the daily newspaper. The article appeared in the Dallas Morning News. Dead Sea Scrolls mention death of Messianic leader, and the New York Times reference to execution of Messianic leader is found in scrolls. I'm going to read from the Dallas paper because it's more complete, and the New York Times, curiously, omitted all reference to Scripture. The Morning News listed out all the Scripture. I find that interesting. In any case, the article went this way. The dateline is Associated Press from Los Angeles. Newly released text from the Dead Sea Scrolls mentions the execution of a Messianic leader, suggesting that some ancient Jews shared the Christian concept of the slaying of a Messiah.
But then Bart Ehrman, the leading historical Jesus advocate, says the Jews would never invent a crucified Messiah. They would never invent a pierced Messiah. That's pure bullshit. They already had a pierced Messiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And you can easily see how the way they were searching the scriptures for God's hidden mysteries and secrets could see that a Son of Man, messianic, suffering servant figure would die and come back.
Scholars said Thursday. They don't believe this. These are people who do not believe the Lord's report. The gospel is full of Jewish people believing in Messiah, but discounting the New Testament, and that's okay with me. The power of this new revelation is it's not biblical. There's an extra source now to read of Christ outside the New Testament. Technically, you could say I don't believe the New Testament, but I do believe in the historicity and mission of Jesus Christ. You could do that. Good point,
Jack Stone. I talked about if they found something in the Dead Sea Scrolls and then they said, hey, Christians, hey, Vatican, look at what we have. Hey, you want us to destroy your religion? How about we release this Dead Sea Scroll that totally disproves it? Maybe that's how they blackmailed the church into Vatican too, possibly. Good possibility.
No. One fragment contains 5 lines of text that describes a, quote, leader of the community, unquote, being, quote, put to death, and mentions piercings or wounds, said Robert Eisenman, a professor of Middle East religions at California State University at Long Beach. The text also uses Messiah-related terms, such as the staff, the branch of David, and the root of Jesse.
There you go.
Mr. Eisen.
Yeah, that's in the Florangelium, I think it's called. They connect the branch of David to the root of Jesse, just like they do in Christianity. If that connection's already made, that means we didn't need a historical Jesus to make that connection. Do you guys see the implications of this? I have it right here. Exactly. I'll cite it in my my book notebook. It's in the Florangelium, 4Q174, connects Isaiah 11 with the branch of Zechariah 3 and 6 and Jeremiah 22 and 23. Check out the notes, by the way, guys. This is the type of stuff I'm doing to collect all the thoughts for writing the book. It's quite the weaving of Scripture.
Who helped translate the scroll fragments. Its language is close to that in the Old Testament book of Isaiah, which says, "For our sins he was wounded," and that is Isaiah 53:5. Many Christians use Isaiah's prophecies to aid to their understanding of Jesus, and that is significant. We've taught Isaiah 53 meticulously on our program repeatedly.
Did he just say that the pierced Messiah scroll quotes Isaiah 53? That's a death blow to Christianity being real. It's weird you don't see way more people talking about this. Wonder why.
Many Christians use Isaiah's prophecies to aid to their understanding of Jesus, and that is significant. We've taught Isaiah 53 meticulously on our program repeatedly because it is so Christological. Mr. Eisenman said he doesn't know whether the leader mentioned in the text was Jesus, but he said the text has far-reaching significance because it showed that the scroll's writers and early Christians shared similar messianic ideas. The idea of it, is it Jesus? Well, it is someone at the time of Jesus who came for his people, suffered and died and was wounded for their transgressions. So it sure sounds like Jesus, let me put it that way. But it doesn't literally say Jesus in the scroll. He said the text supports his controversial theory that the most recent scrolls were written by Jews who helped form early Christianity. Many other scholars believe that the scrolls were written by an ascetic Jewish sect called...
The text supports the controversial theory that most recent scrolls, Dead Sea Scrolls, were written by Jews who helped form early Christianity. There you go.
Essenes. The sect called Essenes lived down by the Dead Sea, and of course we have covered their activities before. They were the people from whom John the Baptist came, really. He was closely related to them. And we detailed it in our footage. We've known for a long time there are connections between ideas contained in the scrolls and Christianity, says the scholar. However, this particular idea, the idea of a dying Messiah, is new and explosive, said Michael Wise, a University of Chicago professor of Aramaic, the language of Jesus.
I think I got one of his books, too.
Of course, it's not new and explosive to anyone that reads the Bible, but the point here is these men are not believers. They don't believe the New Testament revelation, but they have found in a completely separate source, a scientific source, a carbon-dated source, that there was a dying Messiah at the time of Jesus. Now, that's a piece of news.
Michael Wise, who we just mentioned, is the co-author of Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered with Robert Eisenman.
The Dallas Morning News put this on page 1, by the way. The New York Times on page 4. Dallas Times Herald, page 5. It'd be interesting. I learned from friends.
Oh, those anti-Semites at the New York Times.
You can figure out where your newspaper is spiritually, I suppose, by the page number of this revelation.
Oh, my God.
Mr. Wise, who helped translate the fragments, said it was always thought at the time that Jews at the time of Jesus expected a Messiah who would restore Israel to dominance politically. Yet the newly released text shows that the Jewish scroll writers had the idea of a Messiah who would suffer and die. That's what explains Jesus. There have been messiahs well, we have messiahs today. We have Reverend Moon, we have Lord Maitreya, we have Maharaj Ji, we have all sorts of messiahs. But the idea of the suffering, dying Messiah is what Isaiah and the other prophets forecast. And that is what Jesus did. He says that shows this was not an idea
That's what they
made up. Well, of course not. Again, Bible readers can read Psalm 22 and Daniel 9:27 and so on and see that Messiah is to be cut off and so on, Daniel 9:24 to 27. But people not reading the Bible have now found this out. The scrolls contain the oldest known copies of the Old Testament and numerous other writings. Scholars believe that they were written by a Jewish sect sometime between 200 BC and 50 AD. That would put it 2 centuries
Yo,
before
Chem
Christ.
Suicide. Thank you, Chem Suicide, with the big dono. Says, Christianity got Europeans to use the fake conversion of Jews as a way to redeem themselves of group criminality and got played 109 times because they use what the Jews gave them to protect themselves. Christian white nationalism is the same fake shield using a religion that accepts all races as a weapon. Good points, Chem Suicide. You're right. Yeah, and it's like if Christians are obsessed with converting Jews to Christianity, you're going to get Jews directing and shaping Christianity. Not to mention that it was started by all Jews and all the first popes were circumcised. Thank you, Chem Suicide.
After him. The 800 scrolls, most in fragments, were found in caves. We showed that on our former program. A group of scholars working under Jordanian and later Israeli auspices controlled access to many scrolls for 40 years, drawing criticism that they were sluggish in publishing translations. And of course, this is they still are sluggish. It's just that people made a concordance, and people from the concordance reconstructed painfully the original text, so the rest of us peons could at last see what they were suppressing here in these scrolls, and it's worth seeing. My, is it ever? If the translation of the fragments is correct, the text is very significant, says James Tabor, a University of North Carolina associate professor of Christian origins and ancient Judaism. It tightens the connection tremendously between the early Christians and the people who wrote the scrolls. Eugene Ulrich, a University of Notre Dame theology professor, said, it's an interesting text. I doubt if one would call it explosive or revolutionary.
Trying to downplay it.
The one who was the chief editor, it says...
Look at that. Notre Dame theology professor says, well, this is interesting, but it's not explosive. It doesn't mean much. Yeah, that's coping. That's downplaying and trying to minimize the implications of all of this. Keep coping, dude.
Character is the one who was the chief editor. It says, as chief editor of the scrolls, Mr. Ulrich was among the scholars who had early access to them. He and his staff suppressed this information all these years. I don't think a man like this, a University of Notre Dame theology professor, would even appreciate that he's reading Scripture, or has other reasons. But why he would suppress so important a revelation for so long a time is beyond me.
And this kook thinks that it's being suppressed because it proves Jesus, and in reality, it's being suppressed because it disproves Jesus.
So long a time is beyond me. Many concepts once believed to be uniquely Christian were found to have been mentioned by Jews who wrote the scrolls, Mr. Ulrich said. What a revelation that is. Jews wrote the New Testament as well, Mr. Ulrich. Jesus was a Jew, Mr. Ulrich. He lived in Israel, Mr. Ulrich. Mr. Eisenman and Mr. Tabor said scroll editors could have published the text years ago and now want to play down its significance because it could damage traditional religious views.
That's the problem why it was suppressed. It would damage religious views. It would damage and challenge and undermine religious views.
Mr. Ulrich denied that the text was withheld.
Shalom. Hello again. Now, you may remember in early November, we made a program on the newly released text of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The November.
Okay, hey, let's pause it here. We got 4 minutes left in the show. That's a good place to pause it. We're going to put a bookmark in that and come back. I'm going to do more Dead Sea Scroll videos. This is really important. It's a topic that everybody's heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they don't know about the details and how explosive and important the implications are. Here's the overlap between the Dead Sea Scroll Essenes and Christianity from When Christians Were Jews by Paula Fredrickson.
Group as the Essenes. This is the community that collected and preserved the library recovered almost 2 millennia later in the caves of Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. We can discern many areas of overlap, both in terms of religious mentality and in terms of social behaviors, between these Dead Sea sectarians and their later contemporaries, the Assembly of Jesus followers in Jerusalem. Both communities expressed intense messianic speculations. Both voiced vivid apocalyptic hopes. Both communalized property. Both advocated sexual renunciation on the part of some members in preparation for the impending end time. Socially and spiritually, in other words, a vivid expectation of the end time seems to have evoked similar beliefs and behaviors on the part of the two communities. We will explore these similarities further on. Here, however, we must note instead a strong point of contrast. Whereas the Christ follower Paul evidently revered the temple in Jerusalem, the priestly Essenes reviled it.
See, the Essenes were anti-temple, anti-Pharisee, anti-Sadducee, just like the Christians. They were still Jewish. You want to know why the Christianity says some bad things about that? Because they came out of the Jewish Essenes. There's your answer. Still Jewish, still apocalyptic, still messianic. And it's so funny. The Christians will be like, "You guys are dumb, and you guys don't understand Christianity." Meanwhile, have they read When Christians Were Jews or any of Paula Fredrickson's books, or even heard of Paula Fredrickson? Have they read any of Eisenman or James Tabor's books? Or do they know any of the Dead Sea Scroll material? They don't. They don't. They're totally ignorant with Dunning-Kruger effect.
And feelings of injury. These members and allies of the Zadokite high priestly dynasty had lost the power struggles of the Hellenistic period. Theirs had been the family sanctioned by biblical tradition. The Hasmoneans, priests, but not Zadokites, in their view had usurped their rightful position. They named the empowered Jonathan the wicked priest, the evil persecutor of the priest, that is, of their anonymous Zadokite leader. So intensely did they hate their Hasmonean rivals that they actually rejoiced when, in 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey conquered Jerusalem and defiled the temple. After all, the temple had already been defiled, as they saw it, by their upstart priestly opponents. The wicked priest forsook God, he robbed and amassed riches, heaping sinful iniquity upon himself, and he lived in the ways of abominations, amidst every unclean defilement. The New Testament's Gospels are considerably kinder to Caiaphas. That part of the Essene community
you see, that's so
lived
funny.
By the Dead Sea, in strong contrast.
Did you hear what he said? That Christianity is nicer to the high priest of the Pharisees, Caiaphas, or the Sadducees, than even the Dead Sea Scrolls were. Are you going to sit here and tell me that the Dead Sea Scrolls aren't Jewish, like you do Christianity? When Christians were Jews, yeah.
Trust to the community of Jesus followers who settled in Jerusalem, seems to have refused any contact with Jerusalem's temple. In addition, they measured time by a solar calendar, not by Jerusalem's lunar one, so that their biblical holidays remained out of sync with those of the rest of the nation. So they waited, their apocalyptic convictions compensating for their current displacement. Once the final battle between light and darkness was won, they believed, there would come a new temple.
Just like Christianity. Sons of light, sons of darkness, the new temple, the heaven. There's even the concept of the heavenly temple.
Group as the Essenes.
Come on.
This is the community that collected and preserved the library recovered.
Okay. Another book, Forgotten Origins, The Lost Jewish History of Jesus and Early Christians. Another great audiobook that I've listened to over and over again so many times. Here's the Testament of Levi found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs of Levi here.
The Dead Sea Scrolls preserves several fragments of the Testament of Levi. The fragments are preserved in Aramaic and are dated to the end of the 2nd century BCE. The fragment designated 4Q541, FR9, relates to the most striking passage of those preserved. According to Geza Vermes, it refers to an eschatological priestly figure. Wisdom. He will...
An end times wisdom priestly figure like Jesus. 200 BC, by the way. Did you hear the date on that? 200 years before Jesus supposedly lived, and you're already seeing the themes that we find in Jesus.
Tone for all the...
Yo, John and Base World says, in John lashes not in his image, he makes the argument that Paul was a double agent to the Zadokites, the Dead Sea Scroll dudes, and Gentiles. It makes perfect sense, and all the parallels add up. That's true. I actually have his book. He talks about the Zadokites. He says Paul was a double agent for the Zadokites or against the Zadokites. I can't remember. Eisenman, he probably copied Eisenman. Eisenman basically argues that Paul inverted the stuff in the Dead Sea Scrolls to create Christianity. So in a way, Christianity is like the Gentile inversion of Judaism. It's the dialectic. It's the antithesis to Judaism.
The sons of his generation, and will be sent to all the sons of his people. His word is like a word of heaven, and his teaching is according to the will of God.
They say the same thing about Jesus in the New Testament. His teaching is according to the will of God. Jesus says he came to do the bidding of his God or something like that. You see it already in the Testament of Levi. Here, I want to look it up on ChatGPT.
His people. His word is like a word of heaven, and his teaching is according to the will of God. His eternal sun will shine, and his fire will spring forth to all the ends of the earth, and will shine over darkness from the dry land. They will invent stories about him, and will utter everything dishonorable against him. Evil will overturn his generation, because... will be, and because lies and violence will fill his existence, and the people will go astray in his days, and will become perplexed.
The people going astray after this messianic figure, that's what they say about Jesus. Leading people astray. The tester of the Jews, the false Messiah that the Gentiles put their hope in. Testament of Levi. Okay. And then when we pick up next show, we got the Dead Sea Scrolls uncovered, a couple highlights from Eisenman's book. I believe this is the one that's Eisenman's book. Like the New Jerusalem scroll. And the hymns of the poor. I think that's the one about the circumcised foreskin of their hearts. Oh, you thought Jesus came along and said, you don't have to circumcise anymore. You can just circumcise your hearts, spiritual, inward Jews, i.e. Christians, circumcise the foreskin of their hearts. His teachings, pre-Christian, already doing the same thing. There's no Jesus that did this. They just incorporated this story. And then we got Proto-Christian Qumran scroll, the agenda of the Jesus myth. The Son of God plate, the Son of God scroll, is a reference to Daniel. The firm foundation, the Aaron scroll. Okay, we're going to go over that. We're going to watch the rest of this doc. We're going to show some of Eisenman in his other video as well. And we will pick up where we left off, because I'm still not beating this cold. I've woke up with a sore throat again today. Not good. Okay, let's back's killing too. These 2-hour streams just fly by. Okay, if I can find the super chats and read, no, that's not it. Read the last of the super chats here so I don't miss anybody. Okay, that's the last one from Chem Suicide and Drum and Bass World. Shout out to you both. as well as Slavia, Dominic Buscemi, Overtime, Bloodstained, General Commentary, EIQ Mystic, Arcade Post, Jesus Never Existed, Tucker Tarleton, John Garadas. I saw your new mix. I'll play that next stream. I'll be back tomorrow with my buddy Dominic. We're going to be chatting and live streaming, live reacting to Trump's address to Congress. Thank you, Duncan Bates, General Commentary, Immortal Al. Yeah, it feels like we're taking crazy pills. People need to come back to reality and realize Jesus is fake and Jewish, and it's a deception. Thank you, William Orange, and everybody else that donated. Layla, Ghost of Eldon, Princess Wrongthink, Lisa, Zionist Cuck, Rudy. Thank for the tip on the book of Jasher, chapter 8. And Andrew, glad to hear you have freed your mind from the Yahweh Moshiach delusion. Love you all. Share the links. Give it a thumbs up. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say in the comments. Everybody have a nice night, and I will see you guys again tomorrow. Take care. Thanks, Stacia. Some wild oil of oregano. I've tried that before. It's hardcore, heavy-duty stuff. Strong, potent. Or lots of vitamin C. I need some. Jack Stone says Christianity supported the creation of Jewish state more than Jews did leading up to the Balfour Declaration. And it's funny is right when they get the state of Israel, all of a sudden they find all these Dead Sea Scrolls. It's like it ushered the fall of Christianity or something. The fall of Vatican II and the rise of Christian Zionism. It's almost like Christianity was created to ultimately fall one day. And then corral all the non-believers to be Noahides and follow Yahweh as Shabbos Goys. And we're already in the process of seeing that happening. Aren't you Christians and Muslims tired of being pawns in a Jewish game? Playing the roles that they crafted for you? Affirming their lies and delusions and their fake prophecies? Trusting the plan that they handed to you? Not me, forget about it.